After launching 5 phones in a span of 7 months in 2018, Realme is back with the latest phone. This is the Realme 3. It's a successor to the Realme 2 but comes with a lot more promise. So without any further ado, let's jump into the review of the Realme 3. So first, let's talk about design. Now the Realme 3 is a departure from all previous Realme phones when it comes to design. Realme has moved to a more unibody-like design which looks and definitely feels much more seamless. The device is quite comfortable in the hand, and while I myself like matte phones over glossy finishes, it should be pretty fine to most. Another thing we cannot miss is the beautiful back. The blue and sea green gradient reminds me of the Huawei P20 Pro, and I was instantly in love with it as I took it out of the box. But I can assure you that it's going to be a big task to keep the back looking like that. Our unit wasn't handled carelessly and I had the case on for half of the time and I still managed to get a lot of scratches on it. I think if you want less scratches, then go with the black and blue gradient or just keep a case on it at all times. Now for the rest of the phones, the buttons are well placed and are quite tactile as well. Along with the micro USB port, you also have a headphone jack and a single speaker grill at the bottom, both of which perform quite well. The speakers don't have a well-rounded sound, but they are at least loud enough for me to hear from another room whenever a message or a call comes in. This also has a fingerprint scanner at the back and a dual camera setup with a cool yellow ring around one of them. Now for the cameras, we have a separate section, but the fingerprint scanners we have to talk about because they weren't really perfect. I have always preferred using physical capacitive fingerprint scanners over in-display ones or even face unlock, but this one had me using face unlock more and more often simply because it wouldn't open at a lot of times, giving me errors. Now I don't know why that was happening. Every time if I face an error and it was happening a few times, then I would go and just register my fingerprint again. The error would stop for some time and then it would happen again. Now I think that might be more of a software optimization issue. Fingerprint scanners have become good enough today for them to not have a problem with things like this. So I am pretty sure it's a software optimization issue and probably Realme will get fixed very soon. You'll be getting the Realme 3 very conveniently in 3 colors. One of them is the blue sea green variant that we have. One of them is a blue and black variant, something like we saw on the Vivo V11 Pro. And the third one is a plain black for the people who want a plain no gradient look on their phone. Now we come to what I think is one of the more noticeable upgrades from the Realme 2, and that is the display. Now the Realme 3 has a notched display, but it's a water drop notch. This makes it look uniform with other phones like the Realme 2 Pro and the Realme U1. The chin is slightly on the bigger side, but the whole phone and the thin bezels do make it look much more modern. I like the display, it's fun to watch things on. That said, the lower resolution is apparent when viewing videos online. For the people who want the absolute best display experience, I'd not suggest the Realme 3. But that said, for the 720p resolution, I think the display quality is quite good. I found no color shifts on the display and the light bleed was also minimal. The color temperature of the phone is slightly on the cooler side. It comes with the Widevine L3 certification, but I expected nothing more from a phone that is priced under 10,000. Now coming to software, I'm glad that Realme has given me more meat to talk about in the software. It's not too much, but it's a start of something interesting. This runs Android 9 Pie with ColorOS 6 skin on top. Now while it looks quite standard and like previous skins, the first change I noticed is the presence of an app drawer. Finally, app drawer on ColorOS. Well, that's like saying that app drawer was the only thing missing from ColorOS. No, of course not, but it's a start. You actually do get an option to turn that on or off according to your preference. So of course, for the people who don't like an app drawer, you have the option. The next thing that's interesting and has changed is the navigation style. You do get the ones that you usually did with the buttons or the gesture navigations, but you also have Android P style navigation with the pill and the back button. Now I've been using that navigation for my daily use and it has been alright. They've nailed the gestures, but it's just that Android P's navigation aren't really too popular with the people. Of course, they've tried to bring that experience to the Realme 3, but I don't know how many people would end up liking that. The rest of the software is slightly painted ColorOS with things like game space, battery saver modes, and India-specific features like bike mode for minimal obstruction. In my opinion, it's still majorly ColorOS with a few tweaks, but it certainly seems like Realme is trying to slowly move away, and maybe in the future we see something like what Poco does, where the OS looks completely different from the parent company while still being fundamentally same. Talking about performance, the Realme 3 carries a Helio P70 chipset inside with 3 or 4 gigs of RAM. The Helio P70 is a slightly upgraded version of the Helio P60, and the benchmark scores show for it. On the screen you can see the benchmark scores, and the scores, as you can see, are very close to a Snapdragon 660. This processor is actually very close to a Snapdragon 660 in chipset performance. That said, the GPU performance is no match for an Adreno GPU on the Qualcomm chip. Now, all that said, all that good scores, I did not have an amazing performance in day-to-day usage. When running big CPU intensive apps, the phone runs well, but when surfing through the UI, switching between apps, it just didn't feel as snappy. I think that Realme needs to work a bit on the day-to-day use because the experience would be slightly faster. There are a few things that I did that helped me with the performance. One of them was turning off the haptic feedback engine. Now, turning off haptic feedback made the phone feel much more snappy. That was probably because the haptic feedback, if there is a lag in the haptic feedback, it feels like the lag is in the UI. Also, speeding up animations helps. Those were the few things that I noticed. I still think it's an adequately powerful smartphone, but the day-to-day usage is something that Realme can work on. Now, there are 3 cameras on the Realme 3. At the back, you get a 13 megapixel camera with the yellow ring. It's at an f1.8 aperture. And you also get a 5 megapixel secondary camera for depth sensing. On the front, you again get a 13 megapixel camera for your selfies. Now, talking about the back camera first, colors, the details, everything looks good for the budget price. The dynamic range also seems to be quite controlled in most scenarios. Here are a few pictures that you can see for yourself. It's just good produced out of the cameras at the back. That said, what I liked much more was the front camera. The selfies are really good. It's the same resolution as the main back camera, but all the selfies look very crisp. It does end up looking too crisp because of the over sharpening. Also, if you don't want as many details on your face, simply play with the beauty mode a little that Realme has really worked on so much. Apart from that, the camera app has changed a little, where now you only get 3 main modes on the home screen and rest of them are hidden behind a menu. Is that good? I don't know. It does look much more minimal, and I anyway use the other modes rarely, so it was good for me. Also, with the recent update, I finally received Nightscape mode on the Realme 3. Now, I'm really glad. Nightscape and night mode is something that became popular by the end of last year thanks to Pixel phones. But I'm really glad that Realme worked on it to get it on a budget phone. Here are some pictures and samples of the night mode, so please take a look at these pictures and let me know what you think. I think they've worked on the night mode well, and the fact that you're getting a night mode on the phone is amazing. All in all, I think that the cameras on the Realme 3 are commendable. I obviously will be able to give you a more accurate reading once I complete my comparison with the Samsung Galaxy M30 with the Redmi Note 7 Pro and of course the Realme 3 in there. But as of now, I think that the Realme 3 has very capable cameras. Now, for the battery inside, you get a 4320 mAh battery, which is an oddly specific number. Coming to the battery life, the experience was absolutely good. The battery easily lasted me all day. While I unfortunately could not find screen on time in the software, I can safely guess that it was somewhere around 6 to 7 hours, of course based on my usage, but don't quote me on that. Also, you get a standard 10-watt charger inside, which is not a fast charger, which takes around 2 hours 45 minutes to 3 hours to charge the device from 0 to 100. Now we come to the end of my review. Is the Realme 3 a good phone? Is the Realme 3 worth it? The Realme 3 is a really good device, and it's clearly an upgrade over the Realme 2. The water drop notch, the great display at the front, the beautiful seamless design at the back, the dual camera setup that takes really good looking pictures, the upgraded crisp selfie camera, the Helio P70 processor, 3 or 4 gigs of RAM. I mean, there are not a lot of things that can be called compromises on the Realme 3. Now, talking about competitors, while there are a lot of phones in this price range, the only one that is the most relevant is the Redmi Note 7 that launched 2 days ago. Now, the Redmi Note 7 has a full HD plus display. It has a Snapdragon 660 inside, which means that you get the same CPU performance and a better GPU performance. It also has 3 or 4 gigs of RAM. It's also a higher clocked CPU. It's just in a lot of ways better than the Realme 3, at least on paper. Now, I have not tested out the Redmi Note 7 personally, which is why I cannot put out my thoughts on the phone, and I cannot say if it's actually in real world usage better than the Realme 3, but on paper it does look slightly better. Now that said, we still haven't gotten the final pricing of the Realme 3. That is, I think, the key for the Realme 3. If the pricing is nailed, then I think it can be a better alternative to the Redmi Note 7 if it's priced slightly lower. But at the same price, at least from the paper specifications and from what we saw at the launch event, the Redmi Note 7 does look like a slightly better alternative. But of course, those are my thoughts without testing the phone. Once we get the unit, we will be testing both the phones together, and I'm sure a lot of you are confused of which one to buy. We'll be testing out both these phones for sure and giving you the results. The Helio P70 is a very good processor. Maybe it outperforms the Snapdragon 660 in some cases. We don't know. We have to test it out. So till we do that, these are my thoughts for the full review of the Realme 3. Please let me know what you thought of this review in the comment section below. Anything that you want to tell me, please let me know that in the comment section below. But I guess with that, we come to an end of this one. That's it for this one. Hey, this is Sreehari from Mr. Phone with the gorgeous Realme 3, and I'll catch you in the next one. I mean, there are not a lot of things that are. I mean, there are not a lot of things that can be called. I mean, there are.